Hi, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Bree. Today's reading vlog, we're going to be trying to read some spookier books for the fall season. So the first book I know I'm going to pick up is The Good House by Tanana Reeve. Sorry, it's very shiny. This is a haunted house story. So we're following a woman who goes back to her hometown with her family to look after the house and have a party there and things like that. This is a summer where she spends all the time, and a tragic event occurs and it kind of changes the course of her life, and then we're following her years later as she's coming back to the hometown and having to deal with all this stuff, and there's some kind of entity or ghost element to it. And I'm going to be picking this up. Just full transparency, I realized I didn't film this intro, so I am coming from the future to tell you that I will be reading this, and then I will also be picking up these three books. I have The Trees by Percival Everett, which is like a mystery sort of book, and then I have a horror novella called The Night Guest by Hildur Kunsdatter, and this is a translated horror. And then I also have An Education in Malice by S.T. Gibson, which is a fantasy kind of dark academia sapphic story, and this is a recent release along with this one as well. So I'll be giving you my thoughts in this video, but just without further ado, let's get into the video. So I'm 168 pages in to The Good House, and I'm really liking it. It's very different than The Reformatory, which I recently read. It's got less of the, I don't know, it's still got a spooky atmosphere, but it reads maybe a little more literary. So we're following the main character, Angie, and at the beginning of the book, actually, there is a prologue which kicks off with her grandmother, who is in a town in 1920, I want to say it was. So she is the only black woman in town, and she's married to the only Native American man in town, and they are kind of shunned from the community, but then they also are known to be healing. She does a lot of healer stuff and has teas and stuff. And it starts where they bring a young girl to her who is what we believe to be possessed, I think is what it's hinting at. And then it skips to the future where we're following Angie, who is the granddaughter of Marie Toussaint, and we're following her as she is hosting a 4th of July party, and it goes horribly wrong, and let's see, does it say it on the back? Yeah, so her son tragically dies, and then we flip forward to 2 years later when she is finally coming back to the house for the first time and starting to realize that things with the house are not quite as they seem. And we are following two different timelines. So we flip back to 2 years previous and we follow her son, and then we go to present day and we're following her, mainly Angie, but then we also get Tariq, who is her ex-husband. And then we've also gotten some perspectives of people in the town, the small town that they're in, and kind of seeing what weird things are going on in the town, and it's all kind of tied back to what happened back in the 20s, and I'm really, really enjoying it. I think that it's got, sorry, Pippi scratching, you enjoying that? Yeah. I think while it seems like that it's a lot, where there's multiple timelines, multiple points of view, I don't think it reads like that. It flows very well, and I think every plot point that is coming up through flipping back and forth, it all ties together and feels like a very seamless story, and we're getting bits and pieces of every little story to make it the bigger picture come alive, and I think it's done really, really well. I'm really enjoying it. I'm interested to see because it kind of feels like a haunted house, but it also feels like almost demonic possession, so I'm not really sure what realm we're going to get into in terms of horror in here. I think that there's just an unsettling feeling, and there's obviously a lot of things of grief in here because we're dealing with Angie as she's lost her son, and we also go into the head of Tariq and he's lost his son, and then we also have Angie's grief over losing her grandmother, and also the fond memories of her. And she went to live with her grandmother in this town when she was very young because her mother ended up unaliving herself, and so there's just this history of grief with Angie and how she is kind of having to deal with it. And we've got some unsettling things happening. There's been a couple scenes, but overall it just feels like sort of an exploration into grief. I think that Tanana Reeve's writing style just is so good. There's just not, for such a big book, I feel like there's not a moment wasted. She doesn't just fill it with filler. All of it serves a purpose, and I really like that, but it also doesn't always feel like this full steam ahead plot. Like there are points where you kind of feel like you're getting like a slower paced story, but yet everything has meaning, if that makes sense. So it really, really works for me. So I will check back in later when I have updated more progress, and then I'm also going to send Karen my thoughts because we were buddy reading this together, and I'm very excited to see what she thinks of it because I don't know if she's read a Tanana Redo before. I think this might be her first one, so I'm really hoping she's enjoying it. She was ahead of me when I checked in, but I don't know if we're now kind of caught up to the same spot. Well, we will see. Hello. Welcome back. For you, it's been like 2 seconds. For me, it's been probably like a week. I did film an update to The Good House when I was about halfway, maybe 60-70% through, and frankly it was incoherent. I don't know what I was trying to say. I was struggling so hard to get words out that I decided I'm not gonna make you endure that. So I'm just here to tell you my final thoughts at the end. I really like this. I don't think I like it as much as The Reformatory. I think for me this is more of a 4-star. And that really comes down to just the length. It is a almost 500-page book, and usually I like a little bit shorter of horror. I think 400 is like kind of my top of range of horror books that I like. And I'm not saying that no long horror book can be good. It's just that I think with this one, it just took a little long to get to the actual spooky parts. It's talking about like generational trauma and anger and grief, because we're following Angie, who's lost her son at the beginning of this, and we're following all the events that have happened 2 years after her son's death, and then we're also following her son and the leading up to how he ended up dying and everything that happened there. But we also have just so many different ways that Angie's gone through grief in her life, and I feel like it really unpacks that and just pairs this horror of losing someone and the generational trauma that happens. And especially because her grandmother was a Black woman in the 1920s in a small town in Washington, and how that's affected her family, and even how Angie still has to deal with things. I think that that's explored. All of that is paired with like this kind of supernatural horror, and I really liked the pairing, but I just think that this was a little slow. It was much more about like family life and Angie's like family dynamics. And at the beginning of the book, her like husband, they're estranged, but they're still together at the beginning of this book, and it's like her son and her husband and like the dynamics of that, and then also her dynamics with her grandmother. It just leaned a little more literary as well than I usually like, and so pairing with literary plus being a little bit longer, it just wasn't quite a 5-star for me. But I really feel like I would recommend this to anyone who's looking to get into horror too, because there's gross parts for sure, and there's scary parts for sure, but it's also just like a kind of a family drama. There's trigger warnings and everything. Like it gives you a taste into what horror can be, while also kind of, I think, bridging a gap between literary in some ways or mystery in some ways. So I feel like this could have more mass appeal for people. So I really liked it. I'm definitely going to be continuing reading Tanana Review. I have The Between by her as well, and I hope to pick that up soon because I really just like the way she writes a story. She has very different styles between the Reformatory and here, because the Reformatory, she creates such atmosphere and like really pairs it well with the time period. Like the writing reflects that, and the writing reflects being in the modern day. And I don't know, she just has like such a storytelling way that I can't describe it, but just really works for like every different book that she's writing. Now, granted, I've only read 2 of her books, but I still feel like it's going to carry over to the in-between, or the between. I don't know, I want to say the in-between. So that's A Good House. I really am glad I picked it up. Next, I'm going to pick up a book that I picked up while I was in Cape Cod, and that's The Trees by Percival Everett. I got this from, I put the bookmark in here, C. Howell Bookshop in Cape Cod. This is something I saw because Kayla read it from Books and Lala, and it's a like mystery set in the South. I believe we're following a couple of murders that this Black man's body is like found with the murdered victims, and he is like disappearing from each crime scene, and the police don't know why he's there at each crime scene. I think that they're gonna bring in the FBI to like figure out who this Black man is. Oh, and it says it does resemble Emmett Till. So if you know the history of Emmett Till in the US, he is a young boy who was, I think, 14 when he was lynched in the South in Mississippi. And I think this is actually taking place in the same town that happened in. And so I'm interested to see where it's going to go. I've never read a Percival Everett, but it's a Booker Prize winner. I just think it sounds really good. And just from looking at it, it looks like it's pretty like short chapters. I could see where like this was only a couple pages, so I feel like it's going to read pretty quickly. So we will see. I'll let you know what I think when I get to it. So I've been editing for most of the day, but I also started reading The Trees, and I'm 142 pages in. I've been flying through this. First of all, they're extremely short chapters. Like some chapters are only a page, like half a page. That's just one chapter and then goes to the next one. And it's a lot of dialogue. So it does just read really, really quickly. But that being said, I'm enjoying it. It's basically about racism in the South and in the US in general, but specifically we're in Money, Mississippi, where Emmett Till was lynched, and this is true American history. So we are following people who are very racist, and they are being murdered in like very kind of graphic ways. And there is the body of what looks like Emmett Till found at every crime scene. And I feel like I can't really say more than that because it just takes off from there. We're following a couple different perspectives. Like there's been many different perspectives, but we are mainly following our two detectives. And now we have a third detective in the mix, and they are coming to discover what's going on here. And it's getting weirder as they go on. And I don't think necessarily it's going to be a speculative book. I feel like it's going to be rooted in reality, but I just really don't know how it's going to end. Sorry if you can hear that. Kaladin's eating. It's got like a good mystery to it, and it's fast paced. Like the pacing is really working for the story, and I feel like there's a lot of hostility growing. And we're also kind of getting perspective of cops as well in this town. And so we also see how they're not willing to help with the FBI. One, because they're the FBI, and two, because the FBI people are Black as well. So there's a like racially motivated hatred, but also a, what do you call it? Like hierarchy. They feel like bringing in the FBI thinks they're too dumb to figure out what's going on, which in this case, not necessarily inaccurate. And we are, yeah, just following a bunch of different perspectives. There's not really much more I can say about the book other than I am enjoying it. And I think that it's got a lot of topics that are very poignant to the US as a whole, and like the racism that is here in the US and the history of racism. But it's like also just a mystery that I'm having a good time trying to figure out, you know, what's happening. So I'll let you know when I finish. I feel like I will fly through it. So I'll let you know. Oh. It's about to be playtime, so I gotta go, and I will check with you later when I'm finished. Pretty sure I'm back in the same spot I left you in yesterday, but it's got the best lighting in the house right now, so that's where we're at with it. So last night I finished The Trees by Percival Everett, and I really enjoyed it. I think it is somewhat a mystery, but it also really isn't. Like, yes, you're trying to figure out what's going on, but I would say it's mainly about the commentary on racism and the history of racism and slavery in the US, and all that I think was well done. But I will say I do think it got a little repetitive in certain spots. I think that was purposeful because I think Percival Everett really wanted to like hone in the message he was conveying, and we get, you know, pages of names of people who have been lynched in the US and killed without any any justice for them. And like you can actually see on the cover, those are names. I don't know if it's gonna show up, but like, so the cover has all these names of people. And so you do read pages that are just like names of people. And it's not that that is repetitive. It's more that the like body finding scenario, we kept like replaying that scene over and over again, but from different areas in the US. And I think that that just ended up feeling a little repetitive in the end. Again, I think it helped hone the message, but just as a reading experience, it wasn't the best from a reading experience, but it was good for the narrative. Oh, Noah's calling me. So overall, I enjoyed it. I think I would give it 4 stars, and I think that it's one worth picking up, and I really flew through it. Like, it's very dialogue heavy. So if you're someone who doesn't like a lot of dialogue, just know that this is very dialogue heavy. But I think it was really good, and I'm glad I picked it up. I enjoyed it, and I would recommend it to the masses. So that's The Trees. And to carry on the spooky vibes, I think I'm going to sit here and read The Night Guest by Hildur Kunstadter. And this is interesting because it's actually translated by Mary Robinette Quall, who is an author I actually have on my shelf, The Spare Man. It's like a sci-fi mystery. So I found that super interesting. But this one is something about Reykjavik streets and a unraveling nightmare in the midnight streets. So I'm going into this really not knowing anything. So I'm excited to sit here and read it. And I think I will start it right now and hopefully give you thoughts when I'm done. Since it's so short, I will let you know when I've finished what my actual thoughts are. I think this is also going to be a short one because it's also got like a chapter with just one word on it. So we shall see how I like it. So, as I was editing, I realized I did not fill in my final thoughts about The Night Guest, and then I also read An Education in Malice and just didn't vlog it all. I read it kind of in one day, so I read it really quickly, and I just wasn't feeling the best, I think, or forgot about the vlog, I'm not sure. And so I never wrapped these two up. So, let me give you thoughts on The Night Guest. This is translated from Icelandic, yes, and we're following a woman who is having like problems sleeping, and she's going to a psychiatrist and she's going to the doctors, and nothing is visibly wrong with her. A lot of the test results are coming back fine, and it was really interesting because the beginning, I feel like it feels a lot like when you're trying to get diagnosed with a chronic illness and everything seems fine and doctors are like, oh, well, all the tests are fine, and clearly something's not fine because clearly you're in a lot of pain and having a lot of issues. And I really related to that portion of the book a lot. It felt very true to my own experience with chronic illness. So I really liked it for that. But then we kind of just morph through this like kind of dreamlike state as she is having more and more issues, and she feels like she's not sleeping and she's just having a hard time like figuring out what's going on. I think in the end I am going to give this 3 stars. I think I appreciate what it was trying to do, but I think in this case, I wanted a little more building on the story as a whole, and the ending was kind of weird or ambiguous. I don't know if a lot of people classify it as weird, but because there's like this dreamlike quality, I left it really hard to figure out what was actually happening, and I'm finding that I don't think that really works for me in stories. I like something a little more concrete. So I read Bunny earlier this year, and I didn't love it, and I think it's really just this idea of like kind of a stream of consciousness or a dream sequence, kind of like a fever dream feel, and this kind of had that vibe as well, and I just don't think they work for me because I think I just get so confused of what's actually being said and what's real and what's not real that I end up just more confused than anything else, and I don't really feel like I get the takeaway messages as much. So like the ending to this, I didn't really understand. Like I understood it, but I didn't really get what we were supposed to take away from it. So that's why it's a 3, because most of the experience was pretty good. It was just kind of like as the book goes on, it kind of gets more dreamlike quality to it, and that just kind of didn't work for me. But that's The Night Guest. And then I read An Education in Malice by S.T. Gibson because I read A Dowry Blood earlier in October or September, and I really enjoyed it, and I gave that one 5 stars. So this one is not really some people have been saying it's a sequel, but it's not really. It's just another kind of vampire retelling. So this one is supposed to be sort of a loose retelling of Carmilla. And I never read the original source material, but I have it on my shelf, so I do want to read that at some point. But this, we're following a young girl, I can't remember her name at the moment, Laura. And she is going to this girls' school for poetry and writing, and so she's in this really prestigious writing class, and she kind of becomes rivals with this girl Carmilla, who is the teacher's pet and top of the class. And we get Laura's perspective and we get Carmilla's perspective, and it is also a sapphic romance, and we're just trying to figure out, like, there's kind of this eeriness going on at school, and you do know that vampires are a part of it. And not spoiling anything because it's on the back, but you also have this Professor De Fontaine who is kind of has this weird relationship with Carmilla, and you don't know really what's going on. And so it's about Laura kind of figuring out more about Carmilla and the world that she is living in. And then it's also about Carmilla and figuring out, like, her relationships and learning more about what De Fontaine, is that how you pronounce it? I don't remember. De La Fontaine is, like, up to. I think that the atmosphere was really good. If you like dark academia, it felt like that. I think the, like, actual school feeling of the campus and everything was very dark academia coded, but I wish there was more class stuff. There was very minimal of it. For all the tension it was building, you were building to this, like, thing that's happening, and I know that's vague, but I feel like it's kind of not in the synopsis, so I don't want to give anything away, but you're building to this event and this kind of scary thing, and the build up to me just, like, fell a little flat because it was all this build up, and then the resolution was so quick and, like, very anticlimactic that I didn't think it was a payoff for how much we had to, like, wait to get to. And I enjoyed Laura and Carmilla's, like, interactions and stuff, but I think it just didn't have the same vibes that I got from A Dowry of Blood. It didn't, like, suck me in quite as much. So I think I'm gonna go with, like, a 3.5. I did like it, and I can see why people will really like this, but I think if you're going in loving A Dowry of Blood, just know, like, it's not the same vibes as much. It's less atmospheric than I think A Dowry of Blood was, and I think it just meanders a little bit in the plot and then just goes really quick at the end, so the, like, pacing of it wasn't the best for me. So I think I'm gonna go 3.5, but I am glad I am glad I read it. So there you go. There are all the books I read in this reading vlog. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, leave me, like, a blood emoji down below if you made it to the end, and let me know if you've read any of these books and your thoughts on them. I feel like this one's been out for a long time, so I'm really, like, interested to see what other people have thought about it, and if you're gonna pick up, like, any of the newer releases, I'd love to know. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.